안녕하십니까. 오늘 아침 일찍 이렇게 많이 나오셔서 감사합니다. 그러면 편의상 제가 영어로 회의를 진행하도록 하겠습니다. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Fortunately, the international oil prices have been stabilizing during recent weeks. However, the question is whether the situation in oil market is temporary or else. We're very fortunate this morning to have the globally renowned scholar and consultant in the area of oil market, oil and gas market analysis. Dr. Fesharaki is with us. He is currently is chairman of an internationally renowned consulting firm called FACTS, F-A-C-T-S, Global Energy. At the same time, he is a senior fellow at the East-West Center. By the way, this morning we have Dr. Charles Morrison, who is the president of East-West Center with us. Dr. Fesharaki was energy advisor to the Prime Minister of Iran in the late 1970s. Also, he has been consulting major oil companies in this region, particularly he is on the advisory board of Nippon Oil, which is Japan's the largest oil company. And also, he has been involved with Korean oil companies with his consulting capacity for many years. Actually, he has been advising Korean government as well, directly and indirectly. Actually, he worked very closely with oil experts at the KDI since the, I suppose it's 70s, right? 70s, 80s. And so he knows Korea very well, and he has many friends in Korea. And he was past president of the International Association for Energy Economics. So he is very distinguished, respected scholar as well in this field. Well, I don't think I should waste any more time and tell you it's a long list of his achievements in his brilliant career in this field. We're very fortunate to have him this morning. Actually, he is in town to attend. Actually, he is, I suppose, a key person in organizing the internationally organized conference on very important case. So, with this, I'd like to ask Dr. Fesharaki to address the question, the issue we have, and I'm sure he will provide us the best answer for the question we have. Please join me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sipol. I'm very honored and pleased to be here. I had the chance to meet Dr. Sagom in his previous incarnation, both as Minister of Finance, as the Senior Secretary to the President of the Blue House. As he mentioned, my involvement and the history in the Korean oil industry is very long, at least 24 years. And I have had the fortune of watching developments all this period of time. And so this gives me a good sense of history, how things have evolved, where they started, and where they like to go. Today, what I would like to offer you is two things. One, a view of the global oil and gas markets, where the direction is likely to be, what are the key factors affecting the future trends. And the second section, what does it mean for Korea? And when it gets to the Korea section, I will offer you my insights about what are the key issues which I think affects the Korean energy security issues and the Korean policies, and how these international forces have a direct bearing on Korea. So this is a bit of a musical presentation. You see some sounds here or there, but there is a paradigm shift, in my opinion, in the global oil market, and the paradigm shift has very big implications for Korea. First thing I want to tell you, as many of you, of course, are the experts in the field of economics. I know there are better economists in Korea than many other countries when I go. But when we economists do forecasting, we all do it the same way. We assume a GDP growth rate, we assume an energy GDP elasticity, and then we come up with energy demand forecasts. But actually, we don't know what the future GDP is going to be. So by definition, the assumption of the GDP in the future itself leads us to demand always growing. You have never seen anybody giving you an energy demand forecast which is declining. It's always growing. But we always assume the supply will come. And in the past, the supply always did come. The proposition that I will put to you is that this time around, there is a long-term supply problem. And I think that is what is making this market very different to the past. That indeed the supplies will not be there as we go along the time, and we have to face higher prices to reduce the demand, to make the supply-demand equilibrium. So many international organizations, international energy agencies, large energy companies, they all make forecasts of the future, and they all say the future demand is going very fast. You see forecasts of demand for China always going through the roof, for India always going through the roof, but nobody ever says, is there enough oil to supply them? Is there enough gas to supply them? The reality is that most of these forecasts cannot happen because the supply will not be there. And the adjustment factor would be the higher prices, adjust the demand downwards. 2004 was a very unusual year. The demand for oil grew fastest in many, many years. 3.1 million barrels per day. But after that 2004 demand growth, things have slowed down quite a bit. This year, oil demand growth worldwide is only 1.1 million barrels per day. In Asia, 2004 again was a unique year, with China growing almost 1 million barrels per day. Last year, Chinese demand growth was much smaller, less than 300,000 barrels per day. This year would be moderate, 400,000 barrels per day. But the important point to note is that higher oil prices have already impacted demand. Indeed, in the Asia-Pacific region, demand growth is very, very slow outside of China. China accounts for 2/3 of the demand growth, and India accounts for another 15%. So China and India together are 80%. Korean oil demand, for example, this year is negative. Last year was almost zero. Next year will be very small. Korea is a developed country, OECD country, mature economy. The development of demand is always going to be slow on the oil side. So on the gas side, Korean demand growth has been quite spectacular. Japan is also similar. Japan, because of aging population, and also because population is peaking this year, is now looking at permanently declining oil demand. In Korea, it's going to be sort of zero to moderate growth. But in many other countries, Thailand demand growth is almost zero, Malaysia demand growth is almost zero, Singapore almost zero. So higher price of oil has already impacted these markets, except for China. The Chinese In China, you can think about it in a country of 1.2 billion people, but about 200 million people live in a standard of living similar to a Western European country, and so they have the ability to pay, but the majority do not have the ability to pay. So the idea that every Chinese would have a car and would drive a car and the demand will explode, I think this is a redundant concept today, because every Chinese cannot have a car. There will not be enough oil in the world to supply them. So they have to just find different ways to grow the economy. So the key issue I wanted to bring to your attention is that these high prices, which have made a big dent in Asia, have made almost no impact in the US. In the US, the demand is still growing the same as before because these prices are too low. Americans always like to complain about high oil prices because they think oil should be cheap. But in reality, the ability to pay has gone up so much that the demand is still growing very, very fast. Some small change from the SUVs and big trucks to smaller cars have taken place, but very small change. It did in my office in Honolulu. Two of the junior people in my office have just bought 8-cylinder big trucks. So if they can afford to do it, then it cannot be too expensive. So this is a signal that in fact the market prices are still not high enough to make them change their behavior. So the big question for us is this. Today we produce about 85 million barrels per day of oil. What are the limits? Are there any limits? Our proposition is that once we get to about 100 million barrels per day, another 15 million barrels per day more, we will get to a situation of flat supply, not growing. So demand cannot grow because demand will get stuck at that price. Why is that? Well, on the supply side, there are two parts of the story. One is the countries outside of OPEC, and one is the countries inside of OPEC. The countries outside of OPEC are, most of them, having limitations of supply resources, with two exceptions. One is Russia and Central Asia combined. The other one is Mexico. In Russia, Mr. Putin has decided to embark on a new policy which is not too different from resource nationalism policies of other countries. He says, how much oil can I produce to keep a sustainable production for 50 years? I think that's a legitimate question to ask. And to come to the answer, he has concluded that the present level of oil production is about enough. So Russia produces now 9.5 million barrels per day of oil. When you think about that, that's about 4 times the Korean oil demand. And second largest after Saudi Arabia. But he doesn't want the production to go above 10. Now, if the Americans were running Russia, the production would go up to 15, 18, and then collapse afterwards. But here is a government which I think has a legitimate point, that I want a long-term sustainable production. Same policy that Saudi Arabia has, same policy that Kuwait has, and to extent, same policy that Mexico has. And so, in a way, it is not just a resource constraint, but it's a policy constraint by the governments outside of OPEC, which is making this an issue. This year, non-OPEC oil production is growing. Next year, it will also grow because projects already have been invested in. But from 2008, 2009, we expect the production to be, non-OPEC production to fall significantly. Which means, insofar as oil prices are concerned, next year may be about the same as this year. The prices will be soft, $55 to $65 a barrel maybe. But I think that we have to realize that there is no going back to the old prices. There is no going back to $30, $40 oil. That we have now changed plateau. We've gone from one floor to another floor. The same way that in the 1970s we changed plateau. We went from $1.50 oil to $10. We never came back to $1.50. We went higher and we had cycles. So the key issue really is that we have changed position, we changed plateau. Now what about inside of OPEC? OPEC countries have large resources, but they suffer from several problems. One is that there is a natural decline. Some of these fields are really old. they lose about 1.2 to 5 million barrels per day every year by natural decline, which means they have to add so much to stay flat. This is a big undertaking, especially because many of the OPEC countries, key countries, do not allow foreign investment. Saudi Arabia, as the world's largest oil producer, allows no foreign investment. Kuwait allows no foreign investment. Iran allows no foreign investment. Venezuela allows no foreign investment. Then you have Iraq. Iraq, I think, as soon as it becomes fully and truly sovereign, they will do the same. The issues of allowing ownership of equity resources by foreigners, very hot political issue in this country, and quite unpopular. So I expect that OPEC countries would have limited ability to add to the production capacity, both because of lack of investment from outside the technology, but also because of natural decline that they face. So if non-OPEC does not grow, all the demand must come from OPEC. And OPEC countries, in our views, will not be able or willing to add to the production capacity. So what happens in this environment is that you see a situation where the price of oil will begin to rise, go higher until the American consumer is forced to move away from wasteful consumption of oil. What is that level of price? Well, I don't know, but I know the current prices are too low. Our assumption is that you need a price of $80 to $100 a barrel to force the American consumer to consume less. America consumes 21 million barrels per day of oil. If Americans saved 10% of their oil consumption, it would be almost equal to the total Korean oil consumption. And if they move away from the big trucks and SUVs to regular cars, it will be equal to the total consumption of oil in Thailand. Just a move. So any change in America is critical for the oil market. In fact, the heart of the oil industry is in the US, it's not in China. The US is such a huge consumer. Any small change in patterns of consumption makes a big impact for everyone. Number one consumer of oil in the world is the United States at 21 million barrels per day. Number two is China at 6.5. So China and all the 26 countries of Europe combined are less than America. So this is, I think, the realization that it's a huge market. And in that market, small changes make big impacts. Unfortunately, this administration in the US has done nothing to try to do something about either changing of the standards of the car, what we call in the US the CAFE standards, which put limitations on the mileage that the cars are driven, or adding any taxes. Of course, if you add taxes to gasoline in the US, the voters will throw you out of office. So, very unpopular. But essentially, energy policy and looking at the future in this administration in the US has been non-existent. The issue is that if the US wastes energy, the rest of the world will pay the price. That's the problem. It isn't just the American problem, it's everybody's problem. And so the issues of the US policy decisions become very important for everyone. So what happens in Asia? Asian oil market, incremental demand growth every year is about 50% of the total in the world. China, Japan, Korea, and India make up, combined, the four of them, for 70% of total Asian oil demand. These are the four giants. But the real growth is not seen only in China and India, as Japan is declining and Korea is flat decline. The region is heavily dependent on imports from the Middle East. Some 72% of the Asian oil imports come from the Middle East. The future trend points to more dependence and closer political and economic ties between Asia and the Middle East. Now, one of the key issues of the Korean energy policy always has been diversify. But frankly, diversification may seem like a very nice argument, but it makes no difference. We are in one big swimming pool. The swimming pool is all connected. If today you don't use any oil from Nigeria, if there's a crisis in Nigeria, Korea is affected. It doesn't matter whether you import from where. Everything is interconnected. Many people say, let's buy oil from Russia. Is Russia more secure and dependable than Saudi Arabia? I don't think so. Certainly, the recent past has shown that under Mr. Putin, Russians have been quite happy to twist arms and pressure people, political pressure, for selling them resources at a high price. Not giving them away resources for free, but charge high prices and exert political pressure. So it is a global phenomenon, and rather than trying to diversify and buy from this and that, I think focusing on using oil and gas more efficiently and more wisely is a better way of trying to diversify geographically. This gives you an idea of the Asian oil demand, and you can see, of course, what happens in China. This is demand growth in selected countries. What's happened in the past and future year. Past and current period, China was very big and now become smaller. But altogether in Asia, there are 4 big players which dominate the market. To give you a relative growth path, again, you can see that Japan is the only one which is looking downwards, but all the countries looking up, and China, of course, expected still to lead the other countries, although we don't trust the big oil demand forecast, which sees that everything goes through the roof, because the ability to pay in China becomes limited when the price of oil is high. This gives you an idea of the dependence factor. You can see the blue on the top shows you the domestic production in Asia. The red on the bottom shows you the import requirements. So as the demand grows, it has to be imported, because the domestic production is pretty flat at about 8.5 million barrels per day. And this has been like this for the past 20, 30 years. So somebody produces less, somebody produces more. But Asian production, chance of it going up is almost zero. Sometimes people say, well, if the Chinese and the Vietnamese reach agreements, and if the Chinese and the Spratly Islands reach agreement, the production of oil will go up. I don't think that is true. I think it makes some small difference in the total picture. But Asia has limited resources. We have to accept it. And it has to come from outside. Now, what comes from outside is maybe from the Middle East. So if you look at it, in 1999, 12 million barrels per day came from outside. This will become 21 million barrels per day by 2015. In 1990, this figure was only 3. So the dependence in this region has changed very much, particularly when China became a net oil importer in 1993, and Indonesia became a net oil importer in 2005. If you look at the oil exports from the Middle East, where do they go? Asia-Pacific region, if you add all the countries in the region, it is the main market for the Middle East. In fact, US is about 12%, South America less than 1%, Canada less than 1%, Europe 16%, Africa 4%, but the rest is all coming to the region. If you look at it the reverse, from the crude imports into the Asia-Pacific region, 72% come from the Middle East. And internal supplies from other countries in the region, Asia-Pacific, is only 10%. So this is something which is not going to change. And unfortunately, some government policymakers, they think that government policy can change the geology of the world. It cannot. We need to accept the geology of the world and plan our policies around the realistic conditions rather than trying to reach unrealistic expectations. Energy security has become one more time a very attractive topic. So here are a few thoughts to share with you. Is nuclear power coming back? Yes, it is coming back in a big way. And I think this is a very big change. A year or two ago, if you asked me, I would have said that nuclear power has little chance of coming back. But now, high oil prices have meant that it is going to come back. And in the US, it becomes more and more important. This year, there are 75 applications filed with the US government for building nuclear power plants. Maybe 1 or 2 gets built in the next decade. But it is the environmental groups which are anti-nuclear power, particularly the Greenpeace has now taken a position supportive of nuclear power. I think in Japan, Korea, it will also have a very strong future. I think China and India will be no option scenario for them. Diversification of oil supply, does it help energy security? As I said to you, no. The oil market is all interconnected. It's just a psychological issue. In effect, it makes no difference. We have things like gas to liquids, coal to liquids, coal to gas. These things are being tried everywhere. Limited impact. If you make all the coal into oil, then coal prices go up. It's not possible to say that, okay, I will change one thing to something else, but it price remained the same. No. If China moves very big into changing coal to liquids, then China becomes a coal importer. That's the reality of the situation. Biofuels. Do they make a big impact? In Asia, very limited. In the US, much bigger. In fact, but in the US, the policies are driven by the agricultural lobby. To convert corn to ethanol is nonsense. You spend more energy than you get out of it. But it makes the farmers rich. So you have to look at it as not energy security, but more political lobbyism. In the US, it makes a big difference. In Asia, very limited impact. Now the Korean government is mandating use of ethanol in fuels, and it's going to come. But at the end of the day, you can be more dependent on ethanol imports than on oil, and pay much higher prices. Ethanol prices are much higher than oil prices today, and energy security issues could be more serious. Some people talk about the Canadian tar sands or Venezuelan heavy. The Korean government has started a new initiative today, requiring or asking, not requiring, asking very strongly many Korean companies to participate in investments in Canadian tar sands. Many of my clients in Korea are having their arms twisted to participate in these projects. And do they make a difference? Yes, to some extent. They are useful. But it is not the price. If the price of oil is $1,000 or $40, the development in Canada will be about the same. It's already economic. The question is that this is a manufacturing process. You don't dig a hole in the ground to take the oil out. You have to manufacture a big factory, $5 billion, to make tar sands into oil. You need environmental permits, you need water permits, you need natural gas allocation for hydrogen generation. You cannot build 50 of them a year. You can build maybe one a year if you're lucky. So the amount of contribution they make to the total energy security is limited. Nothing is better than transparency. Having futures markets, someplace that you can hedge. In the US and Europe, there are futures markets. In Asia, there isn't any. And a new one is now being planned in Dubai, which will cover the Asian market. And the new contracts for futures market will be launched on January 1st. We had the president of that organization at the conference that we had. And that, if it works, it adds to energy security because people can hedge their bets. And the international market is connected. But it is a financial tool to hedge against increases, price increases. It doesn't produce new oil. The issue is that supplies are a long-term problem. Refining issues. In this part of the world, Korea specifically, Korea is a big exporter of refined products. Why? Well, the history, which I remember very well, was something like this, that the Korean companies wanted to be, government wanted to deregulate the companies, but wanted to give them enough size so they can be competitive. It took about 15 years for the regulation in Korea to be completed in 1997. But the Korean oil industry has built too much refining capacity. So as a result of which, today Korea exports 700,000 barrels of refined products. And is that good? Well, if the export market is good, it's good. If the export market is very bad, you have to lose money. And if you lose money, that means that you will run less. Domestic market is the key. The export market is a balancing item. But around the world, oil prices became strong because there was not enough refining capacity. This is an important issue. Refining capacity is a cyclical business. In the 1990s, there was too much refineries, people lost money, so they stopped investing. So in 2004 to 2006, price increases were led by lack of refinery capacity. So then everybody rushes to start building. And there is a massive overcapacity coming in front of us by 2010-11. In Korea, there are two major additions. One is the Incheon refinery taken over by SK Corporation. It has to be upgraded and expanded. And as some of you may have heard, now SK is offering shares for Incheon. We'll be offering shares in an IPO in London very soon because the cost of the upgrading is too expensive. But what happens? If the demand in Korea is not growing, you add capacity, it has to go outside. At the same time, the Saudis, which control S-oil in Korea, are planning to build an additional refinery, which would be almost 500,000 barrels per day. So Korean export capacity will double by 2010 or 11. Again, if the outside market is not good, this could be a problem. If the outside market is good, it could be money making, but it is somewhat a risky strategy. Again, in Korea, the way the system works is that refiners have a special arrangements with marketers. So if you have more capacity, it doesn't mean that you can get more of the domestic market. Domestic market is very much segmented and is held by different refiners based on specific arrangements between the refiners and marketing companies. So you can build more refineries. You have to take it out of the country because you cannot sell inside the country. China is adding huge capacity, 2 million barrels per day. So the Chinese, their demand is growing, but they're building for themselves. They don't want to export, they don't want to import, they don't trust the outside market. They want to be able to make enough for themselves. But India is building to export. India becomes a larger exporter of refined products than either Singapore or Korea. The best refinery and the largest refinery in the world is being built in India. And target exports, US market, European market. This is quite spectacular that the Indians build a refinery better than any refinery built in the United States and target the long distance market. These are very radical shifts in the business. But everybody is adding capacity on the refining. Some people are adding capacity on production side. But refining capacity additions are so much more that in fact some people will find themselves in difficulty accessing crude because the crude will be used more inside the system by the countries like Saudi Arabia or Kuwait who are adding capacity themselves. It takes us 100 million years to make oil, but only 4 or 5 years to build refineries. So we can always overdo it and underdo it. This time we are overdoing it and people will have to lose money. So that is their problem. But it does have an impact on the markets because too much refining capacity, the price of refined product will be looking downwards, but the price of crude will be looking upwards. Let me talk a bit about natural gas business. Natural gas business has some of the same resource issues that I mentioned about oil, but it is more about building liquefaction capacity to export liquefied natural gas. In the Middle East, some countries, Yemen, Oman, and Abu Dhabi, have sold out. Everything is already gone. Now, the new player in the energy market in the world is the small country of Qatar, which from the end of this year will become the #1 exporter of energy in the world, taking the place that Indonesia has had. But their exports already committed pretty much uses all the resources too. So we can't be looking for too much supplies out of Qatar beyond what they have already committed. In Iran, my home country, huge domestic demand internally, second largest gas reserves in the world, a lot of hope from Korean buyers that they can buy gas from Iran. But very unlikely because the domestic market will absorb most of this volume and what will be exported will be very little. So in the LNG business in the world, 4 big changes have come. One is that the price of oil goes up, the price of gas goes up naturally. Second, the construction costs have gone up so much. We know construction costs have gone up for everything. But in the LNG business, 300% to 400%. So once you build one of these big plants, you have to sell at a higher prices, otherwise you lose money. So this is, I think, a very big shift. Today, the people who want to build refineries, petrochemical plants, liquefied natural gas, gas-to-liquid projects, all use the same contractors. These contractors have upped the prices by several times They are late, 2, 3, 4 years late, and they charge too much. So many people who have resource development issues, they have to wait until the market cools off. The United States has emerged from zero importer of LNG to number 1 and number 2. Perhaps a little smaller than Japan, maybe even exceeding Japan later on. But this is a big change that you have a huge player suddenly entering the market as an LNG importer. And if you're a buyer in Korea, you have to compete with the United States. This is the key issue. Korea today, after importing LNG for 2 decades, will use less than the US will use by 2010. So the US, as a giant market, enters the market in 5 years, 6 years, gets ahead of the second largest importer of LNG in the world, which is Korea. And the other issue which is very important is that Indonesia, which has been the largest exporter of LNG, almost goes out of business. Some resource issues, but a lot of it, bad management, bad policies, and essentially lack of incentives. We expect Indonesia to become a very, very minor player by 2010. So Korea depends a lot on Indonesia, Japan even more. Have to look elsewhere for new supplies because you cannot count on the Indonesia supplies anymore. So Qatar becomes the central player in this market, and they will dictate and dominate the LNG market. The Japanese have been much more effective and more successful than Koreans in terms of securing supplies for LNG. Japanese realized earlier that they can't count on Indonesia, and they started to mop up all supplies. Now in Korea, as I will explain a bit later, the issues of deregulation, privatization between the previous government and the current government has left the system paralyzed. There is no privatization, deregulation is kind of half done. As a result of which, Korean entities, particularly Korean Gas Corporation, was not allowed to sign long-term contracts. And so if you want to buy short-term contracts and you cannot sign long-term contracts, you can't go. Meanwhile, the Japanese moved and bought everything. I think this is a consequence of energy policy which have been very serious for the Korean energy security. This gives you a view of about who is going to buy the gas. You can see the US from almost zero in 2000 becomes importer of 70 million tons. And by that time, we expect the Korean demand to be about 40 million tons. So Korea would be a bit more than half of the US. But we have new players. United Kingdom emerges as a huge buyer of LNG. Spain emerges, almost the same size as Korea. So in the past it was simple. It was Japan, Korea, Taiwan. Now you have US, Spain, and UK added to this, and making the situation much more complicated. And they will compete for the same supplies, and they will pay higher prices because they are from the economies where the price of oil and the price of gas is determined in the futures market by a free market agreement. You know, today when you buy oil, it's very simple. The price of oil today is determined in every aspect by spot price. Saudi oil is linked to spot price of Dubai crude every day. So when you want to pay, you know what prices to pay. The price of gas in this part of the world still goes on long-term contracts, 20-year contracts, with the floor, with the ceiling, with the S-curves. It is a long-term commitment. Today, Korea is paying $12.50 million BTU, which is equivalent to almost $100 oil, for Indonesian gas imports that they signed, Korean Gas signed 17, 18 years ago. Why? Because at that time, nobody expected the price of oil to go up. So you link them together. And today, actually, Korea pays the highest import LNG prices in the world. Earlier contract. Some of the earlier contracts that Korea has with Qatar, $11 a million BTU. And you multiply that number by 6 to get the oil equivalent. So $11 a million BTU is about $66 a barrel of oil, or fuel oil, which in terms of crude oil, $80 crude oil. So it is important to make sure that some of those mistakes in the past are not repeated. But what do you do in a situation that you cannot sign contracts? Because the government won't let you sign the contract. And you have other buyers emerging, big buyers, rich buyers, powerful buyers. These buyers, many of the major oil companies, gas companies in the world, actually are American or European, and they are in the business to buy. Competition becomes much, much tougher. Let me skip here and talk about implications for Korea. The Korean oil and gas industry faces a series of critical energy security issues. These issues emerge from both global market as well as the domestic management issues inside of Korea. Korea is an OECD and IEA member and mature economy. It exhibits similar characteristics that other advanced economies do. But there are important differences. The oil and gas industry in Korea are quite different. The oil industry is fully deregulated and mature, with private companies dominating the downstream sector, and a well-run Korean National Oil Corporation. The gas industry has public sector dominance through Korea Gas Corporation, the largest importer of LNG in the world, with a strong reputation. Moreover, Genco, these are the power companies which have, in theory, separated from KEPCO, but they are still the same, children of KEPCO, are still controlled by the government. The privatization plans of KEPCO has been unsuccessful, both under the previous administration and the present administration. The government has given up. So KEPCO still remains a government-owned company. If you privatize them, nobody wants to buy them because they are loss-making operations. The price of electricity in Korea is too cheap, and nobody is prepared to invest in these companies. But there are many other private city gas companies and IPPs, as well as new and emerging LNG importers, POSCO, K-Power, and GS Caltex. The petroleum sector in Korea is dominated by 4 companies, the 5 refineries. S-Oil, majority share of Saudi Aramco, Hyundai Oil Bank, majority share of IPEC, which is an Abu Dhabi company, GS Caltex, 50% Chevron, and SK, the largest company in Korea, many small foreign shareholders, but no dominant foreign player. KNOC, the government-owned company, is in charge of storage, crude and products, international exploration development, and as government companies go, is considered a successful state-owned enterprise. The Korean oil market is fully deregulated. It is dominated by private retailers, marketing the refined petroleum products. It is disappointing, with disappearing and weak independent importer. Korea is the only OECD company where there are no independent operators. Independent operators were killed by the big companies because they could not survive the system. There's a long story about that. The retail market in Korea is highly competitive, and it's very difficult to earn new market shares at the expense of others. In Korea, you want to take market share from somebody, you enter a war in which you will lose billions of dollars. So everybody knows that entering the war is very dangerous, and nobody wants to begin confrontation between the companies. Oil demand in Korea is weak. Korea is a mature economy. In 2005, oil demand grew by 20,000 barrels per day. In 2006, the demand is expected to fall by 20,000 barrels per day. As such, any new refineries have to go to exports rather than sell in the domestic market. Korea refining capacity, as I mentioned to you, is likely to double by 2010-12. And because of the new capacity in Sosan City, which is the S-Oil Saudi Aramco company, and rehabilitation and high utilization of Incheon refinery by SK Corporation. Many upgrading projects are there. Korean companies are spending huge amount of money. I would say $10 billion of money is being spent over the next 4 or 5 years. Upgrading, expansions, upgrade of GS Caltex, upgrading of Hyundai Oil Bank, SK, Incheon. This project will be completed by 2010 and 12, at a time that the export market, in our belief, will use major new products from the export refineries, and the margins will be very, very low. Competition for oil supplies become very hard. The Korean companies compete in the international world market to access upstream acreage, exploration and production acreage. And KNOC has been somewhat successful. But the entry of multiple Chinese and Indian companies in the markets have complicated the picture. Unlike Japan and Korea, China is unfamiliar with the culture of oil imports dependence. It is excessively worried about dependency levels and highly, highly aggressive. Russia has been very successful in managing rivalry between Japan and China with the Siberian pipeline projects, starting a bidding war and extracting maximum economic and political concessions from both without even starting the project. In reality, the oil market is all connected. A Russian pipeline from Siberia to Nahotka does not enhance Japan or Korean energy security. It simply makes the Chinese angry and makes them more aggressive in the international market. But actually, the Chinese are the ones which need the Russian oil much more than the Japanese and Koreans, because their big field, Russian field in the north of China, is now in permanent decline. They need to connect something to that. Otherwise, they have to import with this crude into North China also, which makes life difficult for everybody else. So, our idea is that Korea Inc. now needs a new vehicle to ride it. Korea has done reasonably well in international exploration production world. But in reality, the market is dominated by OPEC and the international oil companies, and fierce competition from China and India. It is perhaps time for Korea Inc., led by Canon, to acquire a small to medium-sized Western company with existing assets and established reputation. I think this works much better than buying little piece here, little piece there. Buy a Western company, American and European company, with established reputation, $10–15 billion, and allow that to be the vehicle, the jeep which will drive you to the top of the mountain. Now the Chinese had a similar idea, Sino, but they poorly managed it. If it were not the Chinese, it would have been successful. But China is a very political issue in the US, and the political system simply could not tolerate it. The gas sector issues are different in Korea. Coal gas remains the monopoly, and imports LNG. But as I mentioned earlier, other people have entered the market. GS Caltex now has been given the license to import LNG, and POSCO is already an importer. But all this has lost big opportunities for Korea as a nation. Unrealistic expectation and policy changes meant that golden opportunity to sign low-priced, long-term contracts in 2000, 2004 was lost. Price of gas were at a minimum in 2002, 2004, and Korea gas was ready to buy. The government would not allow it to sign. And the opportunities when POSCO bought. Everybody thinks POSCO is so clever, but POSCO bought at the right time. Very low prices. Now we have the recent announcement that Mosier and Gazprom have signed this agreement for the gas to come from either Sakhalin-1 or from Irkutsk field into Korea. I think this is nice, but still, in my view, it's a pipe dream, it's not a pipeline. Unrealistic. Most importantly, Korea signs an agreement with somebody which has no ownership of resource. Gazprom has no ownership of resource in Sakhalin-1 and zero ownership in Irkutsk. Now Gazprom is a big tough company, and it's a bully these days. They may twist arm and get some shares at the end. But signing an agreement with somebody which has no ownership and expecting that to arrive in 5 years is, I think, excessive optimism. Good intentions and lost opportunities have been, I think, hallmark of many of the policies. The issues of privatization of Kogas, the issues of deregulation have not really been successful. As a result of which, neither the private sector nor the public sector has been able to move onwards. Except for POSCO terminal approved some 10 years ago, the union resistance to privatization deregulation plans was intense. Moreover, the existing LNG suppliers did not see any value in taking to transfer their shares from Kogas to somebody else. The result was that Kogas could not sign new contracts, nor was the private sector, given the opportunity to enter the market. Let me jump over this thing. The key issue today is that Korean Gas Corporation is only allowed to sign short-term contracts. In this market, short-term contracts, it's fine. After 6 or 7 years, you have a problem. Over the next 12 months, Korea needs to access 2.5 to 3 million tons of new LNG. This is a serious problem. Serious problem. And even if Korea is prepared to pay high premiums, the access is not so easy. But the combination of the government policies, lack of clear direction, as well as this very tight market, I think posing serious questions for the energy security issues in Korea. Korea in private government-owned entities need access to several million tons of LNG. This volume cannot be accessed from the spot market. Korea alone can raise the global prices. So what is needed is a decisive move for clear direction. But negotiations must start today, and the policy change should have happened yesterday. At the end, the only realistic potential is the volumes of gas to be bought from Qatar, destined for the US market. But for that, Korea needs to be ready to pay higher prices. Again, we need some serious change in thinking and some sense of realism, putting away the dreams and coming to terms with what is possible in a market which is so rapidly changing. So rapidly changing, which in fact is posing serious dangers to the long-term gas supplies for Korea. Thank you very much for your attention.